So there's a lot of conversation going on about the PlayStation 5 and backwards compatibility. I'd like to share my thoughts on it because while yes, backwards compatibility is a nice convenience, but I'm not sure it's worth getting angry over, and I'll explain why. As of making this video, there is only one console that's confirmed PS5 is backwards compatible with, and that is PlayStation 4. There's a little bit of confusion regarding PS4 backwards compatibility that I feel needs to be cleared up. A lot of people think that only the top 100 PS4 games will be playable on PS5 hardware. Sony has said it expects the overwhelming majority of PS4 games will be compatible with PS5 at launch. System architect Mark Cerny stated that the company has been testing the top 100 most played PS4 games, and almost all of them will be working as intended when PS5 arrives. Sony has also assured people who are interested in the topic they have already tested hundreds of titles and will be testing thousands more as we move toward launch. So I hope that clears things up. Your PS4 games are going to work right out of the gate with PS5, so you don't have much to worry about in that respect. You'll be able to insert physical PS4 game discs into the PS5 and play them, as well as download digital software that you've purchased from the PlayStation Store. And if you're wondering about the possibility of PS4 games running a little better on PS5, they most likely will. At the very least, they should have a more stable frame rate and shorter load times. Sony has spoken about the possibility of PlayStation 4 games running better on PS5, and this is what they said. We're expecting backwards compatible titles will run at a boosted frequency on PlayStation 5 so that they can benefit from higher or more stable frame rates and potentially higher resolutions. We're currently evaluating games on a title by title basis to spot any issues that need any adjustment from the original software developers. I'm sure the reason they said they're evaluating games on a title by title basis is because some games have their in-game physics tied to the frame rate. For example, Bloodborne runs at 30 frames per second. You can't expect a higher frame rate on PS5 without some work being done to the game. Sure, the PS5 could run Bloodborne at 60 FPS, however everything would be moving at 2 times speed. There are other games with the frame rate tied to the physics. I'm pretty sure Fallout 76 is like this, but Bloodborne is the best example as it's a very popular game. There was actually an unofficial Bloodborne patch not that long ago that makes it run at 60 FPS without doubling the game speed. It was made by Lance McDonald and he talked about it on Twitter, but the catch is, as it's an unofficial patch, you need a hacked PS4 to run it, and I don't think anyone's going to go through the hassle of jailbreaking a PS4. I'm pretty sure you need to be on a really old firmware version as well. I bring it up however because if one person can make Bloodborne run at 60 FPS on PS4 Pro, then if Sony had a small team working on making sure PS4 games are backwards compatible on PS5, there's no reason games like Bloodborne can't be enhanced to run and look better on PS5. Something that is honestly pretty great is if you're maybe putting off buying a PSVR because PlayStation 5 is coming out, or if you're waiting for a PSVR 2 to be announced, you really don't have to. PlayStation VR 2 is at least well over a year, probably 2 years away from being on the market. So if you really want to get into VR, I say buy the PSVR now. And if you're one of the people refusing to buy it because PlayStation VR is around the corner, the current PSVR is fully forwards compatible with PlayStation 5. Sony has said that your PlayStation VR headset and peripherals will be fully forwards compatible with the PlayStation 5, meaning you'll be able to plug your current headset into the next gen console and experience virtual reality with probably a considerably better experience. As the PlayStation 5 is also backwards compatible with almost all PS4 software, you'll be able to play PSVR games on the PS5 regardless of whether you own them digitally or physically. That's a nice peace of mind for anybody looking to get into PlayStation VR this summer. A quick side note, if you do get PSVR, please get Superhot VR. It's hands down my favourite PlayStation VR experience. It's so much more fun than regular Superhot and is definitely the most immersive video game I've ever played in my life. Games going forward from July 2020 are actually required to work on PlayStation 5. Sony mandated all games submitted for release on PlayStation 4 after July 2020 must be fully compatible with PlayStation 5. Among the first games announced to be following this order are The Last of Us Part 2 and Ghosts of Tsushima, despite The Last of Us Part 2 releasing before July. If you didn't know that, at least you now know any new game you purchase from July on has to have PlayStation 5 version, and your disc will be forwards compatible. but you should basically be expecting that for every game anyway. The only games you should really be worried about not being backwards compatible are really small indie games that nobody has heard of, or games that sold really poorly. Also sports games, I can't imagine anyone is going to be rushing out to stick FIFA 14 in their PS5, but I'm sure there will be one who does it. Another thing that would make sense is that your PlayStation 4's DualShock 4 controller should be compatible with PS5. It would only make sense as almost every PS4 game is backwards compatible and controllers aren't cheap, so it would be nice to get as much game time as you can out of a controller. I really can't see why the DualShock 4 wouldn't be compatible, at least with PS4 games. Some PS5 games could require its own DualSense controller for specific features, but if PSVR is compatible, meaning the Move controllers need to be, the DualShock 4 is bound to be. I also am really hoping for this because you can use the DualShock 4 on PS3, and that would make one controller usable across 3 generations of PlayStation. On the topic of PlayStation 3, this is where things get tricky. The PS3 was infamously tricky to develop for. It had a complex cell processor that was extremely powerful, but actually utilising that power was no easy feat for developers. I mean, if you take Uncharted 1 and compare it to Uncharted 3, you can see just how much of a difference learning the cell architecture can make. I bring up how complex the PlayStation 3 was because that also makes it quite difficult to emulate. You can't just run a PS3 game on a PlayStation 5. They're completely different systems, so emulation is a necessity, and this is where things start to get muddy. There is a very good emulator for PC called RPCS3, that is a mouthful, which allows you to run PlayStation 3 games on your computer. My PC, which is comparable to a base PS4, can emulate PS3 games. I don't do it, however, because I prefer playing on original hardware, but what I'm saying is if my fairly weak computer can run a PlayStation 3 game through a slowly developed emulator, there's no reason Sony couldn't get a small team of people working on PlayStation 3 backwards compatibility, even if it was slowly implemented throughout the generation, making it so the top 10 PS3 games are compatible and chip away at the library of games. It would add quite a bit of value to the system. I honestly can't see PS3 backwards compatibility being implemented into PlayStation 5. I used to have an Xbox One S and quite honestly didn't play that many 360 games on it, even though I really want PS3 backwards compatibility on PS4 and PS5. I mean, the main reason I love it is because the PS4 is a great video capture system. I'm assuming the PS5 will too, and if there was PS3 backwards compatibility, it would make my life so much easier. I'm putting off buying a really expensive capture card to get my PS3 gameplay for the channel, and backwards compatibility would solve that problem for me. Of course, then I'd have to put off getting PS3 gameplay until November, but still. PS2 and PS1 emulation would be very easy. The PS4 already has a select PS2. Okay, whenever I was writing the script I was not paying attention. The PS4 already has a select amount of PS2 games available for digital purchase, and I'd imagine they would have to be compatible with PlayStation 5, considering they're technically PlayStation 4 software. I can't see PS2 emulation being much different to this going forward, which is sad because it's not hard to emulate PlayStation 2 at all. Plus, the PS2 original Xbox, Dreamcast and GameCube generation is getting a bit of a resurgence because nostalgia for the 6th generation of consoles is getting pretty popular now. Nostalgia for PS3 is potentially even higher as well. Finally, PS1 games can run on practically anything, so yeah, it would be nice, but Sony essentially ignored the original PlayStation this generation for the most part, so I don't see why they'd care about it now, especially after how bad the PlayStation Classic did, even if the PlayStation Classic failing was their fault, not the consumer's fault. PlayStation CEO Jim Ryan has famously said PS1 and PS2 games look ancient and why would anybody want to play them? But he has also said, when we have dabbled with backwards compatibility, I can say it was one of those features that is much requested but not actually used so much. So maybe from a strictly business standpoint, the CEO of PlayStation can't see backwards compatibility being worth it for the brand. Honestly, my opinion on backwards compatibility is all over the place. Yes, it's a great feature to have and a nice option to just have when you turn on your console, but I think a lot of the want for backwards compatibility from PlayStation fans comes from the fact the Xbox can play every generation of Xbox. There's the old saying, the grass is always greener on the other side, and that's very true here. I have a good few friends who primarily play on Xbox. It's their preferred platform, and I don't think any of them play 360 games on their Xbox One. And if they do, it's very rarely. Something like the odd game of Black Ops 2, but even then, they're playing the newest COD, Modern Warfare. So that's why I can kind of understand why Sony doesn't see the need for backwards compatibility on the PlayStation 5, despite the fact I'd be happy to have it.